Hey guys, it's Mershd. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to showcase the team that I use to full auto Hydra on brutal difficulty and get the max chest for every single rotation in the game. First, I'm going to show off the builds that I use for the champions, as well as just talk about the concept of the team and how it works and why it works. However, an important note for this team is that it does take a while because there's a lot of animations going on, and the other thing is that it's very difficult to be able to get a team and make a team that can 100% consistently clear brutal and get the top chest on full auto without touching a single thing, right? With this team, I have managed to hit about 75, 76 million damage on brutal doing it manually. And when I do it on auto, it more or less it will either crash and burn at like 15 mil, or it will keep running, stay full auto until about 35, 36-ish mil. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and show you the team. It's very difficult for me because a lot of the champions that I use for this team, I also use elsewhere on the account. So the builds are kind of like hybrid, right? It's not like the full team is specialized just for Hydra. However, I do have them in gear that makes it so it can at least do it. What I would recommend is, because this is such a long team to get through the run, um, normally I just do it in the background when I'm either, going for a shower, making some food, whilst I'm at work. Like it really depends on sort of what you do in your life, but normally it's just something I leave on in the background. And if it hasn't one keyed it after the first try of like just leaving it on full auto, I'll just hit the replay button or free regroup and then try it again. And 9 times out of 10, it will work on the second, maybe third try, but it's never taken any more tries than that for me at least. So we'll get straight into the team now. The first champion that you'll need on the team is Krisk the Ageless. I got very lucky and I pulled a Krisk without actually realizing that I pulled the Krisk about a year and a half, 2 years ago, about the time I actually came back into the game. So he was a huge pull for me. But in terms of the stats that we have him running at, he's about 55,000 HP with just under 4k defense. He's at 249 speed. He doesn't need crit rate or crit damage at all. That's just sort of a byproduct of the other stuff that I have on the account. And then he needs 500 resistance minimum because he's going to be your debuff tank. He's going to be the guy that the head of mischief wants to target and take the buffs from, and you need at least 500 resistance to be able to somewhat consistently resist that. And if you don't have this, then the team will fall apart because the head of mischief will just keep stealing all the buffs that you're using to keep your team alive. And then that's how the team can fall apart sometimes, right? And then he has 320 accuracy. I would like to bump this up to about 350, but this is pretty much enough to make it so he can land his provoke, really consistency on the Hydra head, which does the cleansing. I can't remember which one it's called. Um, but yeah, these are the stats. The two most important ones are the 500 plus resistance and the 320 plus accuracy. As long as you can hit them, I'd then advise just try and pump the speed and the survivability up as much as you can. I've got him in like perception. He is in a blood shield ring. It's not the best ring that I have for Krisk. However, because I do use him in the Scarab boss, um, I do bring in, or I do use him in a blood shield ring, and I just leave it on to save the silver on constantly swapping out gear. I do have my Krisk fully booked, as everybody should, and I do have a 1-star blessing on cruelty just to decrease the defense on the heads. In terms of his abilities, he's got an A1, which puts out a 30%, or has a 30% chance of putting out a 30% slow on all the Hydra heads. It's pretty good odds, and with this specific team, he is using his A1 a lot. So you get so much value out of this, and the cruelty just basically stacks up instantly against all of the heads. His A2 is an ally protection on the rest of your team, and it puts 2 continuous heal buffs on himself. This is the ability that puts it essentially makes it so he has more buffs than everybody else on your team because he's putting up 2 continuous heal buffs versus 1 ally protection buff on the whole team. Combined with this, where he puts an increased defense buff on himself, and increased speed on the rest of the team, plus the provoke for the cleanser head. And then his passive is just a bog standard shield, but it's really good for maintaining decreased attack and decreased defense on all of the heads, which is nice. And then the masteries, I just have him in War Master with some support tree accuracies, uh, lasting gifts to extend the duration of any buffs cast by him. Again, that's really handy if he's being the buff tank. You want him to have his buffs, the ones that he places on himself. You want him to have them on for as long as possible, just because it'll make it more consistent when you're trying to tank the Head of Mischief. And then Master Hexer to make that slow that he puts out, as well as the decreased attack and decreased defense out there for as long as possible. He is integral to the team. The second champion, who I'm going to show the build for at least, is going to be Lydia. Lydia, she has an A1, which is actually really useful for Hydra, especially when you're against the head that puts out all the fear. Uh, every time that Hydra head gets attacked, he puts a fear buff on one of your team, right? Well, Lydia, whenever a fear buff is, or to be honest, it's a whole list of buffs actually. Whenever an enemy places these buffs on your team, Lydia will just do an A1 and counter attack, right? And because okay, I actually used to have her in War Master, but I changed it because I use her for Arena, and I wanted the extra resistance. Um, Essentially with Lydia, we have 460 resistance, which again, it's not enough to be a consistent tank, but there's a few times where Krisk does run out of buffs for like a turn, and then the Head of Mischief takes a turn, and it's always handy to have a second debuff or like buff tank against the Head of Mischief. But yeah, with Lydia's skills, her A1 constantly counter-attacking when the fear goes out. The A2 decrease defense and weaken, plus strengthen and increase speed on all of your team, making it so you take less damage and deal more damage, as well as move faster, and makes it so the Hydra heads actually do less damage because of the weaken debuff. And then the A3 is, again, it's quite handy. It's essentially, you only really use it for the block buffs ability, and to be honest, it's just like a nice little addition to throw into this kind of team, because we don't bring in an Ugo, we don't bring in like an Uko either, and just having A block buffs can be really handy, whether it is to stop the poison cloud, whether it's to stop the Head of Mischief, like in case Krisk does for whatever, doesn't have enough resistance, or if Krisk is not the person being targeted. It's nice to have a block buff on that Hydra head, just to stop him from being able to consume the buff and spread it across the Hydra heads and be a bit annoying. And then her passive isn't really utilized. Her masteries honestly aren't too important. And then in terms of the stats, we just have her as tanky as we could get her, along with about 230 speed, good enough crit rate, just to make sure her damage output is as high as possible, because her A1 is constantly proccing. And then we've got enough accuracy to land the debuffs on most of the heads, as well as good enough resistance to be the backup tank. The next champion in the team is going to be Valkyrie. Now, normally people are a bit scared to use Valkyrie for Hydra, and I can completely see why, because if the Hydra heads manage to steal the counter attack as well as the massive shield, it's just going to be really, really annoying to deal with. Hence why we have two like buff tanks for the Hydra. Her A1, not too important, it's literally just there to put out a bit of damage. Her A2 is her main ability for this, and to be honest, it's her only other ability, but it's a shield that's based on her defense, as well as a counter attack buff on all your allies for 2 turns. And yeah, this is the ability that essentially makes it so your team don't even really need a healer. It's handy to have one, but it's not compulsory. And yeah, to be honest, it's just huge. And when you combine that with the A2 of Krisk, Krisk's A2 actually increases the duration of all ally buffs by a turn, and this includes counterattack, and it includes the shield that Valkyrie puts up. So the shield is up more or less consistently, and to top that off, we also have Godseeker Aniri. So Aniri, she is there, she's got a passive revive as well as an A3 which revives, and her A2 is another buff extension, plus it also decreases the duration of all buffs on the enemy. So this will increase the duration of Valk's shield even more, as well as all the buffs that Krisk and Lydia put onto the team. And then if for whatever reason the Hydra heads have any buffs on them, it's helpful just to reduce a turn of them and get them off a bit quicker. And the A1, it will literally just heal the ally with the lowest HP by 5% of their max HP. So it's just a nice little heal to top it up. And we have her in a 1-star blessing as well. It's Miracle Heal, just to increase the, I guess, the heal that can come out. It restores destroyed max HP equal to 5% of the heal as well. So yeah, it's just like a handy little thing. In terms of masteries, we have her in War Master, and we've gone down the defense tree just to try and get some counter attacks out again. It's all about counter attacking. Everyone's just relying on A1 and mostly War Master procs for the damage. similar to like a clan boss team, honestly. And then in terms of her gear, we have her in 4 sets of crawl. So her A2 will smack as hard as we can get it. Then we have her with max crit rate, as much crit damage as we could squeeze on, with an accuracy to be able to decrease the duration of buffs on the Hydra heads. And then aside from that, it's just whatever sustainability we could throw into it. But because we have the Valk shield and double buff extension plus ally protection, there's just so much going on to keep the team alive that you don't actually like need a dedicated healer. So she's gone more damaging, right? The next champion is Inquisitor Shamail. And Inquisitor Shamail, he is just like a Hydra god, to be honest. Essentially, when you're against the head that puts out the fear, like the fear debuff, his passive will immediately remove it, but Lydia's passive on the A1 will still proc anyway. So every time there's a fear buff goes out, he's cleansing it and counter-attacking that head. Lydia's also counter-attacking that head, putting fear on herself, which means he's going to cleanse it and counter-attack again, right? So he is like the anti-god of that head. He's really good, and then he has a single target damaging ability, which is it ignores defense based on how much or how many buffs are on him, and it caps up to 4 buffs. 4 buffs, 25% for each buff, and it just means that as long as it's not the head of mischief who's hard to target, as long as the other Hydra heads have swallowed up your champion, this ability will go a long way to freeing that champion, right? And then his A1, he does need accuracy for it, but he has a chance of decreasing the duration of a random buff by a target. And to be honest, I would like to increase his accuracy to be able to utilize that. However, we haven't gone for accuracy. We've pretty much just gone for keep this guy alive, because as long as he is alive, the team can't be feared by that head and the team can still function. Because if everybody's getting feared, they can't use their abilities consistently. You know, Valk might not be able to get the shield up, and then we're extending like then Neri and Krisk will be using their buff extension abilities when the shield isn't up, and that's how the team can eventually fall apart. So yeah, he's integral to the team for that reason, and it just makes it so the team can actually function on all rotations. So if you kill one of the heads and then the head that places the fear spawns, Inquisitor Shamail's there as like a fail-safe, just to make sure that that head can't tamper with what you're trying to do. Then the next champion that is actually in the team, where is he? It is Geomancer, but it's another one I have it out. This is the one that I've got for Iron Twins with 500 accuracy. This one is the one I use for Hydra. He is in Relentless. We want him to be taking as many turns as we can. He is also in the lead spot because that synergizes well with Inquisitor Shamail. So when he actually cleanses, hit the fear, he will. I think it's because of that mastery. Which one is it? Okay, I don't know which one it is. Maybe it's not the mastery. I'm not sure, but either way, whenever he cleanses the fear from your team, whenever it lands on them, he also boosts the turn meter of whoever the leader is in your team. And I use Geo as the leader, plus he's in Relentless, right? So if he's constantly getting his turn meter boosted, plus proccing these extra turns from Relentless, he is able to cycle through his A3 really, really quickly, which means that we can get this on all 4 of the heads fairly regularly and just be able to keep reflecting the damage and doing big damage back to the Hydra, right? And him combined with Shamail, combined with Valk and all the counterattacks that come out, is more or less enough to just keep consistently freeing people when they get consumed. Now, I can't remember if that's all of them. Krisk, Lydia, Valk, Godseeker Neri, Shamail, Gia. Yeah, that's the 6. That is the dream team, guys. So now we're going to get into the run. Okay, so this run is on Hydra Rotation 3 on Brutal difficulty, and essentially what I'm going to do is just speak to you at the start of the run, just to let you know how things are being set up. So we have Valk coming in with the counter attack, Chris comes in to provoke, then you have Lydia throwing out her A2, and then Aneri comes in and just extends all the buffs from Lydia and Valkyrie, with Geo also throwing out his HP burn so he can start reflecting damage onto the cleanse head. And then it get back around to Krisk, and Krisk can use his A2 to extend all those buffs again. So as you can see, we have about 3 to 4 turn duration on all of the buffs on all the allies, and it essentially means that you'll have a massive shield with ally protection, increased speed, heals, as well as a strengthened buff from Lydia, and then look at all the debuffs on the Hydra heads. It just makes it so we can do our damage easier. Then, as you can see, every time one of our champions takes a hit, you're normally seeing most of the team actually get their counter attacks in, get them off, and this is how the team ends up doing damage. So as you can see, it's quite animation intensive. And also Geo is very handy for this team because his A1 puts out decreased accuracy. So if you can land that on the head of Mischief, it just means that he is so much less likely to be able to steal the buffs from Krisk and Lydia that it just increases the consistency of the run as well. And then essentially it's just kind of rinse and repeat, right? This is how it will play out for the start of the run. And then when your team starts getting consumed, you're relying on either Inquisitor Shamel to use his A2 to burst through the consumed like green health bar, as well as Geomancer. Hopefully you can get his HP burn placed on the head that's eaten one of your champions, and failing that, you have Krisk with his AoE A1, you have Aniri with her AoE A2, as well as counter attacks coming in from all of the champions, as well as Geo's counter AoE A1. And yeah, essentially it just means that because of how many turns that your team are actually taking and outputting damage, that your team are going to be able to take enough turns to burst out all of your champions on a pretty consistent basis. Now, what I have noticed in watching some of these run-throughs, when it's left on full auto, sometimes your team will target and focus down a Hydra head, which is low HP, whilst you have a champion who is consumed and like eaten inside one of the heads. An easy way to combat this, if you just notice it whilst you're like checking in on the run, is you can just manually like tap on the head to make it so that your team actually target that head instead of the low HP one. And then 9 times out of 10, your champions will be able to free whoever it is inside that head because they're going to be using all their abilities directed on that head to burst that champion out. However, like I said, this team does work on full auto. It just can take 1 or 2 tries depending on RNG and just how the runs end up, right? It's hard to guarantee the exact same run every single time on this kind of a boss, just because there are 6 different bosses within the fight. And when you include RNG and which debuffs land, which don't land, it can just get a little bit ropey. You also notice Krisk's HP is really low, but it's not normally a problem. He'll normally just heal it back up with all the continuous heals that he has on himself. And then by the time that he's that low and he's getting all the healing in, it's normally time for Valkyrie to come back in and use the counter attack shield ability, her A2, just to make sure that the team stays alive again. And then it buys Krisk enough time to get his continuous heal procs and heal back up to full HP whilst he's got the whole shield to aid with his HP bar. But yeah, like I said, guys, it's a really long run, and that's basically the gist of how the team works, right? It's just really strong buffs on your team, along with 2 debuff tanks to be able to stop those buffs from being stolen or removed, as well as 2 buff extenders to keep them up for as long as possible. And then you just have like multiple ways of doing damage, so you can fairly consistently get the heads out when, or your champions out when the heads try to consume them. But now that that's pretty much explained, I'm just going to speed up the rest of this and let you guys see how the rest of the run plays out. This is one of the runs where I don't touch anything, and we're still quite comfortably able to get the 1 key on Hydra difficulty, so enjoy the video. And feel free to slow down the video if you want to see how the run plays out or if you miss anything. But I'm going to leave it all in just so you guys can see that it is legit, and it does indeed do the job without me touching anything. So yeah, enjoy. Okay, so there you have it, guys. That is the run. As you can see, Geo is putting up a lot of the work, but Krisk is also getting some pretty good numbers for Hydra. Same with Inquisitor Shamel with all the counter attacks. We could probably squeeze more damage out of Lydia if we put her in War Master. Same with Valkyrie. But yeah, overall, I think this team is really impressive. Obviously, it is using some endgame champions like Krisk and Valkyrie, but considering it has three epics, which are like a lot more accessible than many of the champions in the game, I think it's a pretty good solid team. Especially when you consider that it's not using any of the block damage champions for Hydra, like UTO, and it's also not using like an AoE nuke option like Royal Guard or Husk or Trunda, and we're also not using any like AoE HP burners too. But yeah, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully, this is a team that you guys are able to build yourself. It's been very consistent for me. I've been using it for about 3 or 4 months, honestly, and I'm surprised that I've not seen this team actually covered in another YouTube video. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like the video and you're enjoying the content, and leave a comment as well if you found this video helpful. So thank you for watching. Take care and peace.